You must understand something fundamental about human nature before anything meaningful can happen in your life. Strength is not merely a physical attribute, nor is it limited to dominance, physical power, or intimidation. Strength, in its truest form, is the cultivated ability to act when action is required, to stand firm when everything around you trembles, and to remain composed when chaos threatens to tear your life apart. And this form of controlled strength, this deliberate shaping of your potential, is what separates a mature, responsible human being from someone who is simply harmless, compliant, or easily overrun. There is a massive difference between a person who cannot do harm and a person who chooses not to do harm. And if you want to understand what it means to be genuinely good, truly moral, and deeply reliable, then you must first accept that goodness without capability is not goodness. It is weakness dressed as virtue. Most people confuse harmlessness with goodness. They think that being agreeable, being quiet, avoiding conflict, and staying out of the way makes them noble. But those qualities do not reflect character, they reflect avoidance. A person who does not stand up for themselves cannot stand up for others. A person who cannot say no to what is wrong cannot fully commit to what is right. A person who lacks strength, who is afraid of their own voice, their own anger, their own ambition, cannot be trusted with responsibility, because responsibility demands the ability to act powerfully and ethically at the same time. The world does not reward fragile people. It crushes them, and then it wonders why they never became anything meaningful. When you cultivate controlled strength, you enter a different psychological territory. You begin to confront the parts of yourself that you've ignored, the parts that hold aggression, the parts that can fight back, the parts that can assert, resist, and defend. Most people avoid those parts of themselves because they worry that acknowledging them will make them dangerous. But the paradox is that not acknowledging them makes you even more dangerous, not to others, but to yourself. Unconfronted aggression leaks out in unhealthy ways. Unrecognized ambition turns into bitterness. Hidden frustration becomes resentment. You cannot suppress your nature and expect peace. You must understand it, discipline it, and then aim it toward something meaningful. Controlled strength is not about becoming a bully or adopting cruelty. It is about recognizing that within you exists the same raw potential that has moved history, the potential to destroy or to build. And once you recognize that duality, the moral responsibility becomes clear. You must mold that energy into something beneficial. A person who has power but no discipline is a threat. But a person who has discipline without power is ineffective. The balance comes from mastering both, cultivating the ability to confront danger while simultaneously cultivating the character not to misuse it. Think of what happens when a person refuses to become strong. They avoid discomfort. They fear conflict. They hesitate in the face of opportunity because opportunity always demands courage. Their life begins to shrink because they cannot push back when life pushes them. Eventually, the world around them becomes something they must endure, rather than something they shape. Their relationships suffer because they cannot protect boundaries. Their work suffers because they cannot assert their ideas. Their sense of self dissolves into a quiet dissatisfaction because they know, somewhere deep inside, that they could have been more, if only they had been willing to develop the strength to handle the weight of more. Strength, then, is not optional. It is the base upon which responsibility is built. If you want to be trusted, if you want to carry something meaningful, if you want your presence to matter, you must be capable of bearing weight. And weight is not carried by the weak. It is carried by those who have trained themselves to push through difficulty, to tolerate discomfort, to act decisively when necessary, and to remain steady in the face of adversity. Controlled strength also transforms how you see yourself. When you know you are capable of defending yourself, you do not need to be aggressive. When you know you can speak powerfully, you do not need to shout. When you know you can walk away from anything that violates your values, you no longer cling to situations that diminish you. Power gives you calm. Capability gives you peace. Strength gives you dignity. And with dignity comes the ability to act morally, not because you are forced to, but because you choose to. A person who can be dangerous but chooses restraint is someone who has integrated their shadow, who has confronted their own darkness and brought it under voluntary control. This is where real moral worth comes from. It is easy to be gentle when you have no power. It is easy to be kind when you have no capacity for anything else, but it means nothing. It is shallow. It lacks depth. Kindness only becomes meaningful when it is backed by the possibility of strength. Restraint is only impressive when freedom exists to do otherwise. Discipline is only admirable when temptation is real. Controlled strength changes the way the world perceives you as well. People trust those who look like they can handle responsibility. People rely on those who radiate capability. Leadership gravitates toward those who can stand their ground. If you walk into a room with the energy of someone who cannot protect themselves, you are treated accordingly. But if you walk into a room with the quiet confidence of someone who has mastered their own nature, people instinctively respect you, not because you threaten them, but because they sense the weight you carry and the stability you project. And when you begin to live like this, something remarkable happens. You become the kind of person who can genuinely contribute to the world. You stop being a burden. You stop requiring others to save you. You become someone who uplifts, who protects, who stabilizes, who brings order into chaos. That is the moral dimension of strength. It is not about dominance. It is about responsibility. It is not about intimidation. It is about integrity. It is not about fear. It is about readiness. Controlled strength is the foundation of a meaningful life. It is the transformation from fragility to capability, from avoidance to courage, from helplessness to responsibility. And once you understand that goodness is not the absence of power but the mastery of it, you begin to see why becoming capable, even dangerous, is the first step toward becoming someone truly good. Inside every person, whether they admit it or not, there is a private battlefield, a place where doubts, impulses, fears, and unresolved parts of the psyche collide. This inner chaos doesn't politely wait for the right moment to show itself. It erupts during stress, it grows during weakness, and it whispers in the quiet moments when no one else is around. Most people spend their entire lives avoiding this internal storm because it terrifies them. They never want to look directly at the parts of themselves they don't understand, the parts that feel out of control, the parts that remind them they are imperfect, fragile, and capable of far more darkness than they wish to acknowledge. But anything you refuse to confront inside you begins to control you from the shadows. And you cannot build order, competence, or character if you are being silently manipulated by the very parts of yourself you are unwilling to face. Your inner chaos is made up of everything you have avoided: the anger you suppress, the pain you never healed, the ambitions you deny out of fear of failure, the guilt you pretend doesn't matter, the envy you won't admit, the impulses you dismiss as not really you. Yet all of these things are you. They are fragments of your personality, pieces of your potential, energies that, if not directed, spill out in harmful ways. People often imagine that becoming better means cutting away the chaotic parts of themselves, but that only splits a person in half. Growth does not mean amputating pieces of your soul. It means learning to integrate them so they stop tearing you apart. Confronting chaos is the only way you can transform it into something useful. Whenever you avoid your internal chaos, the world outside becomes more chaotic too. If you don't confront your fear, every challenge feels overwhelming. If you don't confront your resentment, every success of others feels like an attack on you. If you don't confront your insecurity, every opportunity feels like a trap. You start to project the turmoil you carry in your mind onto everything around you, and suddenly the world appears hostile, unfair, or too heavy to handle. But the truth is that the world didn't get worse. You simply neglected what was happening inside you. You cannot fix external disorder if the internal landscape is collapsing, and you cannot expect a calm life while your own mind is at war with itself. Facing your inner chaos is not an intellectual practice. It is a confrontation with the emotional truth of who you are. It requires honesty so sharp it cuts. It demands courage that shakes your voice and tests your resolve. You must look at the patterns that have trapped you for years, the decisions that were driven by fear rather than purpose, the habits that sabotage your progress, and the narratives you cling to because they protect you from responsibility. It is not pleasant, it is not gentle, it is not comfortable, but no meaningful transformation has ever come from comfort. When you face your inner chaos, you begin to create space for order. This order is not imposed from outside, it grows from within. You start to structure your thinking. You start to understand the root of your emotional reactions. You begin to separate what you feel from what is real. You learn to identify when your impulses are trying to hijack your decisions. And slowly, the noise inside you becomes more understandable. Chaos doesn't disappear instantly, but it becomes something you can work with rather than something that terrifies you. It becomes material, not a monster, clay, not a curse. And you can shape clay. Competence grows out of this clarity. Competence is not talent. It is the ability to act effectively despite challenge. A competent person is not someone who never feels overwhelmed. They are someone who understands their internal landscape well enough to navigate through difficulty without falling apart. When you know your weaknesses, you can strengthen them. When you know your patterns, you can interrupt them. When you know your fears, you can walk into situations prepared rather than paralyzed. Competence is the reward for self-confrontation. It is the confidence that comes from knowing you have already survived your own darkness and can therefore survive the world. Character, then, is the highest expression of this internal transformation. Character is built when you choose discipline over chaos, responsibility over avoidance, honesty over convenience, and truth over comfort. Character is forged in the moments when your impulses scream for control, but you choose the higher path anyway. It is shaped when you acknowledge your flaws, not with shame, but with determination to rise above them. When you face your inner chaos, you learn humility because you realize how complicated you truly are. But you also learn strength because you discover you are capable of enduring that complexity without running away. Facing your chaos teaches you compassion too. You begin to understand the turmoil others carry because you have faced your own. You stop judging people for being imperfect because you recognize the battle they are fighting mirrors your own. This does not make you weaker, it makes you wiser. A person with character does not become arrogant, they become stable. They stop being reactive because they are no longer afraid of what lives inside them. They stop collapsing under pressure because they have already faced the pressure of self-honesty. They become someone others can rely on, someone who can walk into disorder and bring clarity rather than becoming swallowed by it. You cannot escape your inner chaos. You can only choose whether you will confront it and grow or ignore it and suffer. The parts of you that frighten you are the same parts that, once mastered, will give you strength, wisdom, authenticity, and resilience. Chaos is not your enemy. It is your raw material. And when you confront it, not to destroy it but to understand it, you gain something far more valuable than peace. You gain control over your own nature. And that is where the foundations of order, competence, and character are. There comes a moment in every person's life where they realize that comfort, as appealing as it feels, slowly turns into a prison. It doesn't appear that way at first. Comfort feels warm, safe, familiar. It offers temporary relief, a moment of quiet, a shield against the harshness of responsibility. But what you don't see, what most people never notice, is that comfort begins to harden around you like a shell. It convinces you that difficulty is dangerous. It whispers that effort is unnecessary. It teaches you to avoid anything that stretches you, challenges you, or threatens your routines. And it is only when you finally decide to choose discipline over comfort that you witness how much potential you were unknowingly sacrificing. Discipline is uncomfortable by design. It asks you to do what you don't want to do in the moment, so you can become who you actually want to be in the long run. It is the refusal to negotiate with your own excuses. It is the willingness to endure moments of pain, boredom, challenge, and repetition so that you can develop mastery. But what is truly remarkable is not the discipline itself. It is the person you become when discipline replaces comfort as the guiding force in your life. You begin to feel a shift, almost imperceptible at first, like a small spark of clarity inside the fog of your old habits. And that spark grows every time you choose effort over ease, structure over laziness, purpose over fear. Fear is one of the most powerful forces shaping human behavior, and if left unchallenged, it becomes the silent architect of your entire life. Most people don't realize how many decisions they make out of fear. Fear of failing, fear of being judged, fear of not being good enough, fear of trying something new and discovering they are not who they wish they were. Fear is subtle. It disguises itself as practicality. It pretends to be caution. It tells you that the timing isn't right, that you're not ready, that you don't want to risk it. But underneath all those excuses is the simple truth. Fear is holding the steering wheel while you sit quietly in the back seat of your own life. Choosing purpose over fear is the moment you take the wheel back. Purpose is not a feeling, it is a direction. It is the understanding that life is not meant to be lived painlessly, but meaningfully. Purpose requires attention, effort, and sacrifice. It demands that you carry weight, make commitments, and step into challenges that expose your weaknesses. But in doing so, it also gives you something fear never can, a sense that you are actually becoming the person you were meant to be. The transformation begins the very moment you stop running from fear and start walking toward what matters. When you combine discipline with purpose, something extraordinary happens. Your identity begins to evolve. You stop seeing yourself as someone who must be protected from discomfort and start seeing yourself as someone built to endure it. You stop thinking in terms of, can I do this? And start thinking in terms of, what would I become if I did this every day? Your sense of self grows stronger, not because life becomes easier, but because you become sharper, tougher, clearer, more focused. Discipline toughens your mind, purpose steadies your spirit, and together they create a version of you capable of far more than you once believed. The transformational shift is not dramatic at first. It's quiet, subtle, happening in the small decisions you make before anyone else sees them. It happens when you wake up a little earlier than you want to. It happens when you push yourself to finish something even though no one would know if you stop. It happens when you choose to practice instead of procrastinate, to train instead of rest, to study instead of scroll. These choices don't feel profound in the moment, but they accumulate, they compound. They build unseen layers of strength inside you until one day you confront something that would have broken the old version of you. And you notice, with a kind of quiet astonishment, that you can handle it. This is where the transformation becomes visible. People start to see the difference before you do. They notice the steadiness in your voice. They notice the intention behind your choices. They notice that you don't panic the way you used to, that you don't complain the way you used to, that you don't collapse under pressure like before. There is a solidity to you, a seriousness, a gravity, a presence that only discipline and purpose can create. And it isn't fake confidence. It isn't forced. It is earned through the daily effort of becoming more capable, more responsible, more focused. Most people chase motivation, but motivation fades as soon as life becomes difficult. Discipline stays. Motivation is an emotional visitor. Discipline is a permanent resident. And when discipline lives within you, fear loses its influence. It does not disappear, but it no longer gets to dictate the limits of your life. You start to see fear not as a stop sign, but as a signal pointing towards something important. Fear begins to feel less like danger and more like an invitation to grow. And when fear no longer rules you, you gain freedom. The kind of freedom that makes your life bigger, fuller, more connected to something meaningful. Purpose deepens this transformation by anchoring your discipline to something larger than yourself. When your actions align with a purpose, discipline stops feeling like punishment and starts feeling like devotion. You push yourself not just to endure discomfort, but to create something valuable, to contribute, to aim at something that gives you direction when everything feels overwhelming. Purpose gives shape to the chaos inside you. It turns scattered effort into focused movement. It turns confusion into clarity. It turns survival into meaningful existence. The shift, then, is not simply about working harder. It is about becoming someone who is capable of carrying the weight of their own life without being crushed by it. It is about stepping away from the false safety of comfort and stepping into the discomfort that builds capacity. It is about choosing what is meaningful over what is easy, what is challenging over what is convenient, what is purposeful over what is fearful. And with every choice you make, you create a new trajectory for your life, one where you are forged by your responsibilities rather than softened by your excuses. The transformation happens not in grand gestures, but in the quiet, consistent moments where you reinforce the truth that you are stronger than your impulses and more capable than your fears suggest. And once that shift begins, even slightly, it changes everything about the way you move through the world.